You have questions, we have answers. This is Jay Miller.
And this is Ken Miller. Welcome to our show, all about real estate with Ken and Jane. We have Joe Scaturro of Farmers Insurance returning as our guest today. Joe, thanks for taking time to be our guest again, coming back into the studio. We had a very good show last week, but there were still some topics that
a lot of questions
we didn't get to cover. So to get started with, for the listeners that missed last week's show, just please give your background and how long you've been with Farmers Insurance.
Yeah, I've been in this business almost my whole adult life. Most of that time was in the company side of things. But 9 years ago, my wife Carla and I hung out our own shingle, opened Scaturro Insurance Agency representing farmers. And we've been doing it ever since. The best way to reach us is call our office, 732-410-4160. We answer that phone all of the time. And you can make an appointment with us directly on Google if you like, and check out our reviews while you're there.
Yeah, they're very impressive. And you guys service the whole, pretty much the whole New Jersey area, Central Jersey. And
actually, we're licensed in New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. But obviously, we concentrate on New Jersey. But we do write anywhere in New Jersey. But most of our customers happen to be in Central New Jersey.
Because local.
That's where we are.
Sure, you're local, of course.
Yeah. I mean, just for the listener out there, their office on Route 130. North Brunswick. You can find the address on the internet, and but they're very, very good. And once again, we know them from our chamber. Everybody love them. Carla, everybody love Carla.
Yeah,
that's true.
Yeah, very good company.
And very knowledgeable, very good people, very knowledgeable in the field.
So
we appreciate
always
it.
waiting to help. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So last week's show, we covered the basics of a homeowner's insurance policy, what every policy needs to cover. We spoke about renter's insurance policy, but we touched upon renter's insurance policy. So why don't we talk a little bit more in depth about renter's insurance policy and what that covers for the renters/tenants and what it doesn't cover?
Okay, sure. It's always a good practice for landlords to request that their tenants have renter's coverage. For a couple of different reasons, to insulate them a little bit from their tenant's liability, but also to make sure that their tenant, God forbid the worst day happens, they're taken care of, right? They're going to get what they need done. So as we talked about, a homeowner's policy has 6 major coverages: the home, the other buildings on the property, the personal possessions, the loss of use of the home, the liability, and the medical payments coverages. The renter's policy has 4 of those 6.
Okay.
It just doesn't cover the house because the landlord's policy covers the house and the other buildings that might be on the property.
Yes.
Okay. So here's a question: if the tenant has a guest or visitor and they get injured, due to, let's say, a slip and fall, maybe there's some, they trip on the steps, or if it's a second floor unit or what have you.
Well, means if they have a kid's birthday party,
or let's say they have the kid's birthday party, somebody trips, they get injured, they want to file a claim because unfortunately the family, the child, they don't have medical insurance, so they're just looking, they're friendly, but they just want to get some compensation. So in that case, that having the tenant's renter's policy would be the primary claim, and then the landlord, of course, has their own owner's policy. But I guess it's good. It's just a good idea to have that layer of added protection, so for liability. So
it is because your tenant can create liability on their own.
Yes.
By their housekeeping practices. Right?
Yeah.
If they got a lot of stuff around the house and it's in bad places and somebody trips and falls, the landlord didn't create that situation. The tenant created that situation. But on the other hand, if the house is in poor maintenance condition, then the landlord's probably going to get pulled in on that at some point. But it's great if the tenant has their own liability for their own peace of mind, and so that they don't have to go and hire an attorney in these cases. That's one of the biggest benefits of an insurance policy we didn't talk about last time, both auto and home or any business liability policy, is it pays for your attorneys.
Yes.
Until that policy limit is tendered by the insurance company, they're paying for the lawyers. If you don't have that liability coverage, even if you ultimately win a lawsuit, you lose because you're paying for the attorneys. And they're not cheap.
That's right.
Yeah, and I think
and you have to pay to collect too.
And I think a lot of these issues, from my understanding, do settle. I mean, maybe, but still, it's expensive to have an.
It's expensive to get that point. Yes,
Yes.
to go through depositions and findings.
Yes.
And,
Yeah.
it's an expensive proposition.
Yeah. So any landlord out there listening should please make sure that your tenant, you have a renter's insurance policy in effect.
I can tell you a long time ago, it was like an old story. I was like involved in, right? There is a commercial property in Manhattan. So there is a shop owner want to make it a store. So the landlord have a landlord insurance, obviously. The shop owner have the shop owner insurance, obviously. During they renovate the place, and the worker cut the finger off. So, and the worker sued everybody. The worker sued the building, sued the landlord, obviously, sued the shop owner,
Sued the employer,
even
yeah.
sued the company who supplied the material.
Of course.
They sued everybody.
Sure.
So in that case, can you imagine, if the lease, the person didn't have the insurance, that would be terrible because they haven't started business yet.
Right.
They just lease the place, sign the lease, they get a contractor to finish the place. They haven't started yet. The contractor sued everybody.
Yes.
So that's very important, right? Anything you do, make sure we protect ourselves.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we should also talk about contractors that you hire to do work at your house since we're since we're expanding that. That's another important thing we didn't cover the last show. If you have a worker come, a roofer come to do work on your house or a general contractor, and let's say they're on a ladder or cleaning the gutters, and let's say there's an accident, accidents happen, unfortunately, and that could be, obviously your homeowner's insurance, I guess, covers you for liability, but it's good to make sure that the contractors are properly insured.
Yeah, you always want to get a certificate of insurance. Anytime
Yeah.
someone's going to come on your property to do work for you, to make sure that they've got the proper liability coverage in place, so that if they do get hurt, and workers' comp insurance, if they do get hurt, that their first immediate reaction is not going to be, let me try to find some money from the homeowners, because it's really not where that money should be found unless the homeowner has created a hazard in some way.
They were negligent, and
Right.
and it was their negligence caused it. Then I guess there could be a contribution where they would go after both the homeowner and the employer's insurance. So it's a very it can be a very complicated.
Anybody can be sued for anything at any time. It doesn't have to be at the end of the day
Yeah.
that they're liable. But
Yeah.
just being sued is an exposure in and of itself because of the cost
Of the
defending
attorney.
yourself.
Yeah, attorney. I know. That's why you mentioned earlier, Joe, to have an insurance company, you don't need to hire a separate attorney unless you want to. The insurance company will go to defend you.
Yes.
That's like take a lot of weight on your shoulder.
Yes.
So that's very important. And I did had a client. Another thing, I just brought it up here. I'm thinking of it. And when you buy a property, right? And if you have a mortgage, the mortgage company makes sure you renew your insurance policy. That's a part of it. They will make sure they cover their loan.
Of course, because their lien is on that's their lien, so they have to protect their asset. That's
I understand. My what I want to say here, Ken, is if you're lucky enough, have enough gold in your underneath your pillow, okay, you bought a house by cash, you have to remember to renew that policy. Because nobody, unless you buy a condominium or something, the HOA will make sure you supply the renew. But if you bought a single family and you bought cash, nobody will remind you to pay the policy.
True.
If the insurance company reminds you, send you a letter, send you emails, or in the junk file, you didn't read it, and you suddenly realize you haven't paid for 3-4 years, you better get your policy in place because all these good reasons, right? Sometimes can be very overlooked. I know my client did. Until something happened, call me up. I said, what do? I said, you should call your insurance company. They said, oh, yeah, right. And then called a broker, and they realized they didn't insure for 2 years.
But usually the insurance companies are pretty good. They'll send them premium, the annual notice, they'll send a reminder, then they'll send the notice of lapse. But if the client is overseas or traveling and they don't check the mail,
overseas.
things can fall through the cracks, which is unfortunate. But,
That happens a lot. People travel for extended periods of time overseas. And also, someone who's had a 30-year mortgage or a 20-year mortgage, they've been trained to not
have to
worry about
Yeah,
it.
that's right. They pay it off.
With
Or
the
their property
taxes
taxes.
too, because you have to
Right.
realize if you own something outright with no mortgage, the taxes in New Jersey are due the middle month of the quarter. The town will send you the slips, but you have to either put it on your Google Calendar, your paper calendar. Otherwise, if you forget that February 1st or February 1st and then May 1st and then August 1st and then November 1st,
Right.
you got to pay your
It's a whole new muscle you have to exercise
Actually,
now.
Joe, you're
Yeah.
absolutely right. I had a client, right? They had a mortgage, and then they paid off quick. They paid out in, I think, 10 years. They paid it off, right? And then they forgot they have to pay property tax, HOA. They forgot, and then when they realized they got sued, and then they have to hire a big attorney because they almost get auctioned off.
They'll get a lien.
Yeah, they
they'll
got
get a
already.
tax lien and
They
then-
already got the sold certificate. So when they realized it, they overseas obviously they paid out. They didn't think anything, and then when they got back, oh my God, they already sold the house. They took a lot of attorney fee, a lot of compensation to get it because they didn't think, like Ken said, they paid off their mortgage. They didn't know they have to do all those.
Right, because they've never had to do it before.
Yeah, it used to be just one payment automatically deduct from their bank account. That was it.
They'd get the piece of paper and say, "Oh, the mortgage company's going to take care of this," and
They
put
pay
it
it off.
aside.
Yeah, everything was automated, right? Your hazard
Yeah.
insurance and your taxes are wrapped into your mortgage, and you might have it set up with automatic debit deduct from your bank account, so you
Yeah.
don't do anything for 20 years, and then you figure
It's
everything
autopilot.
is it's
Yeah.
autopilot. Right?
Until it's not auto.
Until it's not.
Yeah, that's right.
Let's talk about flood coverage for let's say homes are in flood zones or high risk or flood zones. Obviously, they would need flood insurance to get a mortgage. How cost expensive is that becoming now?
What's interesting about the flood market is for years, the National Flood Insurance Program, FEMA, was the only game in town. Even if you bought it from Company A or Company B, they just stuck their name on it. Behind the scenes, it was all the one product that was issued by FEMA. And those policies can be quite expensive. Several years ago, they introduced legislation to modernize flood insurance, and they allowed private companies to start writing flood insurance. So there are a whole host of options now for homeowners to choose from that are not FEMA and that offer more coverages, higher coverage limits, because the maximum coverage limit for a FEMA policy is $250,000, which is not nearly enough to replace your average home in New Jersey, right? So you can buy excess coverage on the private market now. And the FEMA policies don't include loss of use of the house. So if you have a fire in your house, you can get paid to live somewhere else from your insurance company. If it's just a flood, I shouldn't say just a flood. If it's a flood, there's no money for that in the policy.
Aye.
So private options are very important. You want to talk to agents about those options. And more important than ever now, because of the type of weather that we've had the past 6 or 7 years, we're getting these heavy-duty convective storms that just sit and dump 10 or 12 inches
And
of
have
water
nasty
in a
winds
place
and-
that never flooded before. You can buy a flood insurance policy for a home, an average home in New Jersey that is not in a flood zone. You can get coverage for your basement, which you can't get in the FEMA policy. It's very limited coverage in the basement. So forget about your man cave getting rebuilt or your she shed or whatever you want to call it. But the private flood policies will add coverage for that. You could pay as little as $600 a year, which is
That's not bad.
That's not
it's
bad.
nothing compared to what a flood damage is going to cost
Nothing.
you. Even a
Yeah.
small amount of water, 6 inches of water can cost you hundreds of thousands.
Yeah, with all the,
I
sure.
remember Scaturro back a few years ago. They had a flood.
Well, that's a whole other
yeah.
topic because in certain of those areas, they're not designated. They're not allowed to be rebuilt in because of that, because they're off limits now. But we're going to continue this. We're just going to take a short break, and we'll be right back after these messages. Okay, welcome back. So, Joe, we were talking about the flood insurance and the fact that you can get coverage now through FEMA, but also through private insurance companies. And you mentioned the flood insurance doesn't cover the displacement, the relocation costs. But is there a way Are there any policies out there where people that are in flood zones could say, you know what, I want the flood insurance to cover me for the loss of the damage and the restoration costs, but I also want to be covered for the couple months. I want to be insured for my relocation costs for the time it takes to restore the flood damaged areas. If I have to vacate
the private market policies typically offer some loss of use of the home coverage, whereas FEMA does not offer that. You just can't buy it. You can't even buy it as an add-on.
So that's something like an experienced agent like yourself,
Yes.
you could really advise your clients. Whereas if you were talking about the whole online thing, that it may not, we don't want to say anything negative about it. But if you're not an informed, having an informed agent can really help consumers make a very informed, very
Flood
important
is
decisions.
not something you want to buy online. You really want to talk to somebody who knows the marketplace and has access to 4 or 5 private companies outside of FEMA. And even within the FEMA product, there's rules about transferring of ownership and grandfathering in of certain homes. So you really have to know your way around it. A lot of agents don't like to play with flood. I find it fascinating, so I like to do flood policies.
Yeah. Now I heard down the shore for those homes that are in certain flood areas, by the bays and the rivers, that they had to, in order to get insurance, they had to rebuild them, elevate them. Is there any universal flood mandate that requires before we insure you, the homeowner has to take precautions or do whatever they can to protect the home, to use best practices before the insurance company will, kind of like analogous to the roof thing where they say, well, if your roof is more than 20 years old, I ain't even going to touch it. Are the flood insurers taking that approach where they're looking at it conservatively and saying, well, if you're in a flood zone, but if you don't implement certain water control measures to at least minimize the damage, I'm not going to insure you?
It works 2 ways. So within the traditional FEMA product, there is what was commonly called an elevation certificate. And that's where you'd have an engineer come out and do a survey and prove that your home was wherever it was above the floodplain, whether that was just because of a natural feature of your property or for something that you did to elevate the property. And if you present that and it goes through the algorithm, you'll get a rate reduction through the FEMA plan because you've elevated the property, you've reduced the risk of loss. And there's all kinds of factors that go into it, like breakaway walls and the size of flood openings and whether you've elevated the utilities to the second floor and all of that. In the private flood market, it works a little bit differently. They often pull in all that data about the home and build that into the price already. So rather than having to prove you deserve a discount, they factor in all of that information, and it will often result in the difference between one home being accepted and one home being declined, which could be the difference between a $12,000 flood premium and a $2,000 flood premium.
Wow, that's a huge difference.
Yeah, well, they look at the risk factors and the restoration involved. If you have the utilities on in the basement, and then there's, they look at that, and that's going to, of course, elevate the premium significantly.
Yeah.
So but is there insurance out there for those individuals that are just happen to be in the flood zone with, the elevation is below the flood line, they have all their utility. I mean, there is an insurance policy out there for everyone. It's just going to be a matter
your
of
only
cost
option is going to be FEMA. The private programs who have the ability to say no to you will say, I don't want that risk.
Yeah.
Interesting.
On my books.
And
let that stuff stay in FEMA, which is why FEMA for so long fought having private companies come in, because they said these guys are going to take all the best
good ones,
the worst,
and they're going to be
and leave us with the worst of the worst, and then rates are going to have to
go up,
quadruple,
go up
because we've got the worst of the worst.
Yeah,
yes. It's no longer average now. It's like
they're
the
highest
risk
risk factor, highest
Yeah.
risk
Yes.
in homes because of that. That's something. And then so FEMA, the limit is $250,000 for the
On a residential structure,
regardless of the size or the value of the property. It could
Doesn't
be a, Could be
matter,
$1 million. It could be a $5 million property down by the shore. It could be a $200,000 50,000 Cape Cod somewhere in not here, but somewhere.
Right, it could be a bungalow in Seaside.
Bungalow.
Kevin can say Cape Cod. I just give him a look.
No.
Where 250
No,
Cape
I was going to
Cod?
say not.
Show me.
Well, I said not here.
Bungalow maybe.
Maybe in maybe a
Bungalow in
bungalow,
Midway.
one bedroom and a log cabin.
That's why when you say 250 Cape Cod, I like to know where. I have investors. I have a lot of people be interested. Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And then, so when somebody has to file a claim, I mean, how does it work for your company? Like, if they call you on, do they usually call you or
Do they
or
call
email
the
you?
company
What's the procedure?
first, or-
What
Yeah,
make it as effortless or as painless as possible?
What we want
talk-
customers to do, the very first thing we want them to do is secure their property, make sure they and their family are safe, right?
Yes,
So
absolutely.
if it's fire, call the fire department first.
Don't
If
call
it's-
Joe. Yeah, you're
If
not,
it's a break-in, call the police first.
Well,
Yeah.
If you've got water pouring down from your ceiling, shut off the water first.
Yeah, that's
Whatever
right.
you have to do to stop things from getting worse, do that first.
and of course, if it was a
Yes.
fire, get the hell out of there.
Right,
and
get out of
your
there.
people, your loved ones, and your pets, and out of there. And
Then
yeah.
we want them to call us so that we can help guide them
Call
through the
you or
process.
call the
call their
insurance
agent.
company?
Call their agent.
Yeah, I mean,
first if
just
they
call
have an
agent.
agent.
Okay.
Because your agent's there to help you figure out what to do.
Mm-hmm.
Get in touch with the company, whatever the right procedure is going to be for your situation.
Mm-hmm.
And often people have a misconception that they don't do anything. The insurance company is going to come and fix everything.
No.
But that couldn't be further from the truth. You've got to go and hire contractors. So if you've got a leak, you don't want to wait for the insurance company to say it's okay to fix that leak. You got to fix that leak regardless.
But here raises the question though. Like, let's say there's some significant damage. Like you've had clients in different rental units in throughout Central Jersey where there's damage due to a leak. Don't they have to? They should at the very least take pictures because you can't
Everybody's
have a contractor
gotta
come in
yes.
and within a day or two and start knocking down. If the sheetrock is damaged, doesn't the assessor from the company's rep have to physically?
Everybody's got a cell phone on them these days.
So
Yeah,
they-
take a picture.
So
you
the
take
pictures are
pictures,
okay.
you take
don't-
videos. The contractors that come in to
The-
evaluate will do the same thing. And the adjusters will, except for the worst cases, they'll rely on that initial look because every day that you let go by, particularly with water damage and mold starts
Yes.
Yeah.
start to happen, every day you wait, the
Yeah.
loss gets worse and worse,
Worse.
and worse.
Yes.
Okay.
And it
Especially-
becomes impossible to live in the house.
Yeah,
I
especially
start
you
getting
mentioned if there's a pipe burst or something, the maximum 25,000. If you wait for a week for the insurance company send people, the mold will cost a lot.
Yeah, you want to
Leave
get that,
alone.
you wanna get the wet product removed. And
yeah.
as
Yeah.
Right, you
possible.
want to
Take-
start
Yeah.
trying that out professionally.
Yeah.
The keyword
Well-
being
professionally, right? Not by yours. Yeah.
Don't
professionally.
put just fans down there and
Then-
hope it's going to do the.
Yeah.
You got to get somebody in there that knows what they're doing, that knows when to spray chemicals, that knows when to put fans, how much fan, how
Yeah.
to vent things,
Yeah.
how to
What
dry
cut,
out
what to
different
cut and remove.
materials.
Because a lot of it
what's
is
to cut,
not
what's-
salvageable.
yes.
You have to just remove it. Yeah, but the key thing is record keeping, documentation.
Yes.
As many photos, lots of
Document,
photos,
document,
Video.
document,
videos.
and don't wait to stop the damage and to start to repair.
That
the
was my
damage.
question. Yeah, because a lot of people are saying, "Oh, I have to wait. Do I have to wait for the
Call your agent.
And what about
Call your agent
And
first.
the
Agent will give
agent will
advice.
guide you, and also the
agent will
contractor.
guide
They presumably they can use a contractor that's qualified and licensed to do the work. They don't need somebody on the list of. There's not a preferred contractor list.
No, it's not like auto body shops where
Where you
each
have to-
company has a network of body shops. Even then, they can't make you
Yeah.
use their network, but they do offer you certain advantages like the quickest turnaround time and extra guarantees on the work. But you can use any licensed and insured contractor that knows how to do the work you're trying to do. Typically, what you find is not that the guys don't know how to do the work, it's that the price that they're offering the homeowner differs quite a bit from what the adjuster thinks is
Yes.
necessary. And that's the process of negotiation. And agents can help with that a little bit.
Okay.
You know, we're not supposed to do a ton of that, but we'll go in there and say, hey, guy, you sure you're looking at this the right way? Or have
Yeah.
you considered this? Have you considered that? And then the last step would be, as we talked last week, you can always call in a public adjuster. And they're going to take a percentage of the claim settlement
Yes.
But they
they may
push the ball over the goal line because they can speak the adjuster's language.
And where do they find the public adjusters? Is that
Google it.
Is it through the agent? You could provide a list for them?
I have a
or
number of folks. You would think the public adjusters and insurance agents are not compatible.
Because
right?
but you're the agent. You're working for the
Yes.
consumer, so really you want to help the customer get what they truly.
I have a
deserve.
number
But
of guys in
that-
my virtual Rolodex that
that-
I will refer to customers that
Okay.
I
That's-
trust to
Yes.
do the right thing.
Very important.
Not just take their check and
Yeah.
throw paper over the wall. They're going to
Sure.
come out. They're going to look at the house. They're going to know what they're talking about. They're going to help.
Okay. Yeah.
You know,
That's
once
pretty-
again, the few times I got a phone call, oh, Jane, my house got flooded, blah, blah, blah. What happened to me? Pipe burst. And what do? I said, call insurance company. Call insurance company. They said, oh, the insurance company will send someone maybe 2 days, 3 days. What do I do in the meantime?
Right.
I said, well, you have to, like you said, secure the place. Make sure not
Secure
going
the
to
property.
shut down the water. Where's the water? Call the contractor. Shut down the water. So
Everybody
it's
should
always,
know where their main shutoffs
Yeah,
is.
that's
These are
right.
how many people don't know the
know.
difference between the water meter and the gas meter and
Yeah.
the electric meter, which is but the water meter is critical to know that where your block valve or gate valve is. to
Right,
shut
and
that-
everybody in the family needs to know where the water shut off.
That's
is. 'Cause
right.
What happens? You go out to the grocery store for 5 minutes.
It's-
Isn't that always when things happen? And your kids are the only ones home. They got to know how to shut off
Or
the water.
washing machines too. I'm a big fan of having
The
the
hoses.
steel braided hoses
Yes.
because a lot of times the washing machines have the rubber hoses, which are
Yep.
okay. But I mean, if you can upgrade them to the steel braided, I think it's a better.
Companies will
safety
insist
feature.
on that if
Yeah.
they do an interior inspection. And also, what's becoming very popular in the last few years are these water leak detection and auto shut-off systems. They work on an app on a phone. You get an alert on your phone that your water usage and if the flow rate is high enough, which would indicate a burst somewhere in the house, the sensor will automatically shut off.
Wow,
And
that's
that'll,
really
and that'll
cool.
give you a
AI
deduction.
again.
It'll
That'll
give you a bit of a
significant-
discount,
little bit
but
of a
more
discount.
importantly, it avoids the pain of
Yes.
going
Up
through a
through
loss.
That's
yeah,
right.
and it gives you
All
peace of
your
mind.
possess-
Just like
even if you got paid for all your personal possessions.
But
Yeah,
you, but
it's
you
still-
don't want
it's
to,
not-
yeah,
it-
you can't.
Right.
not the
They're
same.
irreplaceable, right? All
So
those
wouldn't you rather
photos
not
and
have
look at all
the
those
loss?
poor people
Yeah.
in California and all the
Yes.
victimized,
Yeah.
everything gone, the album, everything burned to nothing.
Yeah.
No
left.
matter how big the check is, it
doesn't cover you.
doesn't
Yeah.
matter.
Wow, we are out of time.
Time
How did that
again.
happen again?
How did that happen again? We didn't even get to cover commercial. We'll have to have you come back another
I'd be
time.
happy to
again.
come back,
Talk
yeah.
about commercial and auto and the
Yeah.
other services that you provide. But please keep Joe Scaturro of Farmers. Give him a call for any of your insurance needs for residential, commercial, auto, and life. And Joe, once again, please share your contact number. And thanks for being our guest.
732-410-4160, or just look us up on Google. You can make an appointment with us right online. Thanks.
All right, thanks. Have a good one. We'll see you next week.
Thank
Thank
you.